And this is a corporate identity. So I know that it's a little bit hard for all of you guys to distinguish between what is the difference between the corporate identity and corporate image. So the corporate identity can be defined as the sum of all methods. This is something that you provide to the stakeholder, to the public. It's all methods an organization uses willingly and unwillingly to identify itself to its public. So that is a set of something that you provide to the public in order to let them know who you are. Image is all about the visible image. This is an image that you want the stakeholder to think about you, know about you, based on the identity that you create and the communication campaign that you create to treat to them. Understanding? So that is image. Image is some relevant or some expected image that you want the people link or the symbolic represent for the company. You want the stakeholder think about your company by themselves, by stakeholder, in the stakeholder eyes. And the corporate identity is the sum of all methods or the set of the activity, all kind of the methods that the company use to identify and provide to the public and identify who you are. Who you are. So the original concept of the corporate identity grew out of the preoccupation in the design and the communication community in the way in which the company present themselves to the external audience and also the internal audience. The way that you express yourself. And so the corporate identity might including some, basically they can including something like logo, like tagline, like slogan. It's something that you create to represent who you are. So that is a corporate identity. Okay, corporate identity. So initially, the corporate identity involving the construction of an image of the organization to differentiate the company position in the eyes of the important stakeholder groups. So that means you focus on the organization image and you want to contrast an image in the eyes of the stakeholder group to show and to be different, to differentiate and show who you are, but in the eye of the important stakeholder. But how you can contrast the image? Using the corporate identity. That means corporate identity can help the company to build up the image in the stakeholder eyes, to let the stakeholder think about your company. Think about your company. Believe in the image that you build up, the good image that you build up, and want to invest in and have a connection with the company. So that is a relationship between the corporate identity and the image. And we have the model from the Burkett and Stadler. They state that the corporate identity is seen as quite a broad concept which encompasses more than corporate logo and corporate advertising campaign. So initially, back to the term initially, the term and the concept of the corporate identity were restricted or be limited to the logos, and other elements of the visual design, but it gradually come into encompass all form of the communication. Okay, so initially The corporate identity is all about the visual design that the company create and public to the stakeholder, like the logo, like the slogan, tagline, like the type, like the word type, like the color, etc. So this is something that you can identify what kind of the company is about. Okay, so this is a corporate identity initially, but through the time, the researcher, they state and prove that the corporate identity is beyond the visual things that the company create and public to the publication, to the stakeholder. So it's not only the symbolic, but also the communication and behavior is also related to the core mission, the strategic vision, and more general corporate culture of an organization. So the identity is not just about the visual thing that you create, the appearance of your company that you create to public to the stakeholder, to let the stakeholder know about your company visually, but also something in the philosophy of the company, like related to the strategy, the core mission, the vision, the mission, the vision, and the corporate culture is also the dimension of the corporate identity. It's not just about the logo, it's not just about the slogan, about the tagline, about the color, about some visual design. That can be the symbolic, could be called by the name of symbolic or symbolism. Something is represent for the company, the symbol for the company, like this. But also the core mission. Also, the core mission can show the identity of your company, about who you are, state about who you are, about the vision, that what you want to become in the future, and more general corporate culture. Yeah. How you can treat with the people, how you can treat the relationship with the company and the stakeholder. So this is all about the component. It's all about the component. Okay, component of the corporate identity. It's all about the symbolism. Symbolism is the, remember for me, symbolism is the logos. Logos are, it's something like the visual design of an organization. So the communication is all planned form of the communication, including the corporate advertising, the events, sponsorship, publicity, and promotion. This is something that you treat to the people. Some communication plan can show the message related to the image that you want to build in the customer or in the stakeholder eyes, and the behavior, all the behavior of the employees that leave the impression on the stakeholder, and also create the corporation identity. Okay, identity. And so the corporate identity management, why we need to manage the corporate identity? Because the corporate identity management into, the first thing is to establish the favorable image, or after that, you can get the reputation of the company with the stakeholder. Because I show you that the identity is something that the company do by themselves to the stakeholder in order to contract and establish the favorable image in the stakeholder eyes, right? And after you create the good image or the favorable image in the stakeholder eyes, so you can get the reputation of the company. So the corporate identity can help the company and support the company to create the favorable image or the reputation of the company in the stakeholder mind and eyes. And besides, the corporate identity ensures acceptance and legitimacy from the stakeholder groups and generate the returns and may offer the competitive advantages as it forms an asset A says that it's difficult to intimate. That means the competitive advantages and the core competency of the company. Core competency of the company. And the corporate identity can create the value for the company because this is an intangible assets of the company. Intangible assets. It's not like the infrastructure, it's not like the human resources, it's not like the financial things. So the corporate identities can become the intangible assets and can bring the value for the company. If you can manage it well, so it can have the company to create the intangible assets and can bring the value for the company. So this is some purpose of why we need to manage the corporate identity, because this is a material for, this is a basic material for the communication and to create the communication, the corporate communication for the company. As you can help the company and support the company to build up the image, as well as to raising the reputation of the company. And so far, it can support to change the behavior of the stakeholder and also can ensure the acceptance from the customer or the stakeholder group to accept the company and the product which be sold by the company. And it also can, from after they accept that, they buy the product, they consume the product and the service which be sold by the company, because they trust in the reputation, they trust in the identity, and they can distinguish between the company and the other competitor based on the identity. So that means they can purchase, you can purchase the product and the service from the company or consume that. And that means you can generate the returns. And the identity can show who you are. And if you manage it well, the people can recognize, and you can have a recognition from the stakeholder with the company, and basically the stakeholder can easy for them to distinguish between the company and the competitor, so that you can create the competitive advantages. That means the loyalty, that means the favorable things of the love, the brand love from the stakeholder. So that is kind of the competitive advantages as it's form of an assets, and it's difficult to intimate. Okay, it's hard to beat and hard to overcome. And so that means the identification or the corporate identity can create the competitive advantages for the company. And finally can create the intangible assets which bring more value and more benefit to the stakeholder. And so that means you can bring more value back to your company. So that is a corporate identity. So we have some component or some contracts of the identity. So what is the component which will contrasted with the corporate identity? So we have a three component here. So the first is the social identity. We have a three component, three contracts. First is the social identity. So the social identity is the individual knowledge that they belong to the certain groups together with the emotional and value significance of that group membership. This is the social identity. The identity of the organization based on the society, on the social value. The organization identity is that the shared meaning that an organization is understood or be understood to have that arise from its members' awareness that they belong to it. Like, for example, as an organization, we know that we are good at A but bad at B. So that is an identity of the organization. And the final is a corporate identity. It's a distinctive public image that an organization communicate that influence the stakeholder image and reputation of that company. So that is the three contracts. When we mentioned about the corporate, when we mentioned about the identity. Okay, so this figure, it can show the relationship between the social organization and corporate identity. Okay, we have it's focused on the internal or external. This is some stage in the corporate identity that the company can do with their stakeholder, and with the form of the communication focus on the symbolic or the cognitive. I mean, raising the awareness. Or you want the people think about the symbolic and create the image, the relevant, the link between the symbol and the company that they build up in the customer mind and the stakeholder mind. So it starts from the social identity. Okay, that's something that you can do to the organization identity, that you focus both the internal and external, and move to the corporate identity that you build up to the external. So you can read more figure and understand and read more information about the figures through the book. The corporate branding. So the corporate branding, the school that they emphasize that the core of the corporate branding is aligned between the company vision, culture, and image. So we can call the branding. The culture and image related to how the organization and its identity are seen by the employee. That means the culture, and the company external stakeholder. That means the external image. And this is two sides of how the organization and its identity are seen by the different kind of the stakeholder. And so the vision of the senior manager at the strategic dimension in that by setting the direction for possible ways of changing and transforming who we are as an organization, is may change how the company is seen internally and externally. So branding is some label for the company, okay, that you want the stakeholder from the internal stakeholder and the external stakeholder think about your company. And this is alignment between the vision, culture, and the image. Okay, so I think that's enough for today.